Round 7 of Norway Chess was a bit of a snooze, but the players made up for it in round 8. There was a real fighting spirit again. So first of all, let's look at the game between Vishwanath and Anand, with the white pieces here against John Ludwig Hammer. Anand's openings are second to none. He played the English, and they've got one of these kind of reversed Sicilian positions. And already I like white's position. Anand played the classic central break here with white. E4, excellent move. The point of this is to break up these two pawns, and that gives white a foothold in the centre. If black exchanges, then you can see that's an isolated pawn, and it opens up the d file. Already very pleasant for white. So Hammer played the bishop back to e6, but Anand broke up these pawns, and that means that white is now able to use that e4 square. Now, there is a slight drawback with playing e4, in that the d4 square is sometimes vulnerable. I would like to play knight d2 here, but you have to watch out for the exchange and then a knight coming into d4. So Anand played a really excellent move here, bishop e3. Hard to predict that move, but once you see it, you kind of think, oh yeah, excellent. Everything clicks into place. It basically means that the knight can move to either d2 or perhaps h4 without worrying about knight d4. So for example, h6, knight d2, and the knight sits on e4, and that's already really pleasant for white. Hammer complicated the position with a5. Now, instead of taking, which certainly would give black very nice counterplay against a3, Anand pushed. Of course, strategically that's the best move, because this one pawn cramps these two, and b7 is still a target. If black goes in with the knight, then white exchanges. Positionally, this is very pleasant for white. It's a classic Sicilian position, actually, with colours reversed, where these two pawns cramp black's three pawns on the queen side, and the bishop is good. The knight spins back to d2 and can either come to c4 or e4. White is better there. The knight went to e7. Now the next moves from Anand, again very subtle but very strong. This knight would perhaps like to come into d5 to hassle the bishop. Anand played bishop g5, very good move, because after queen f7, queen c3 attacks the pawn on e5 with the knight. Now, if the knight goes to g6 to defend, then this is just such a poor square for the knight. Then white continues with knight d2, and everything is fine again. Positionally, white is doing really well. And if knight d5, now here's the trick. Although the queen is attacked, white can actually still take on e5. If knight takes queen here, and otherwise if queen e6 you play queen b3 or queen c4. Basically white can get away with this tactically. Hammer played h6, but I think Anand was delighted to be able to exchange off that very pesky knight. And somehow this is much easier for white to play now. Knight h4, excellent move. Hitting the bishop, but also, of course, opening up the diagonal so that the bishop now attacks the pawn on b7. And this is uncomfortable for black. If the bishop drops back, well, I guess it might be possible to take here, but it could be complicated with this pawn on prise. Instead, white doesn't need to push this one. a4 is very strong. And now bishop e4, positionally really nice move. For example, after the exchange, well, there's a threat to play here. Knight f5. White stands very well here. It will be possible to attack down the d file on the d and c files. White's pawn structure is simply much better than black's. Okay, back to the game. After knight h4, Hammer decided to go in for complications. He took on a3. Anand took on b7. So this is getting a bit sharp. And probably Hammer didn't play in the best way here. He could have avoided the pawn loss. After these exchanges, Anand found himself with an extra pawn. Not only that, positionally this is crushing, because that bishop controls the diagonal here. Black's king is in huge trouble. Although black has a little bit of pressure here, white can deal with that very, very easily. So extra pawn, chances to attack black's king. This must be a winning position. And, well, Anand's technique in such cases is, well, perfect actually. So first of all, h4. It's the classic h-pawn advance. So white would like to play h5 to make sure that he maintains total control over that diagonal, and that'll be really ugly. So Hammer played h5, but of course that compromises the kingside position. Queen d2 is a very good move, looking to move in on some weak squares here. So Hammer covered, and now queen e2, excellent move, hitting the h-pawn. I mean, I guess queen f7 keeps black in the game for a little bit, but then white has a choice. You could play f3 and then activate the rook, maybe down to c6, looks horrible for black. Or indeed f4 is really strong. If that's taken, then rook takes, and soon h5 is going to fall. Yeah, in the game Hammer played, well, the natural move in inverted commas g6, but this fails tactically. And in this position with how many extra pawns? 3 extra pawns. Well, obviously black is completely lost and he resigned here. Really smooth game from Anand. I mean, his play in this tournament is so impressive. You know, never in any real trouble in any games, and he knows how to defend brilliantly, but also, you know, his technique is just wonderful. Let's move on to the game between Magnus Carlson and Levon Aronian. Carlson with the white pieces. It was a Spanish, and here you can see he's a pawn up. Well, Aronian sacrificed this pawn. And Aronian's pieces are very well coordinated, so he certainly has compensation for this pawn. Carlson's problem is that it's very difficult to see how he's going to make any progress here. Although this e-pawn is his extra pawn, well, you know, what exactly can you do with it? And this knight, all its squares are controlled. This knight does a very good job of controlling white's major pieces. Black is simply very active here. Good compensation. I really like the way Carlson dealt with this, actually. Instead of hanging on to that pawn, he just gave it away. e6. It's such an interesting practical choice from Carlson. In doing this, he slightly weakens black's king. And instead of having to defend his position, suddenly the initiative has swung over to white. It's classic Carlson, actually, it really is. It's a beautiful way to play. So if he were to take here, then suddenly you can see the position has transformed. White's rooks have something to do. The knight is looking at this e5 square. White's position is just completely transformed here. Aronian defended the pawn. Now, objectively, of course, this shouldn't be bad for black. But it's uncomfortable for black to play. So now that the rook has left the first rank, then white's rook threatens to come down. And suddenly black has a dilemma. Well, should he move the rook back to d8, but then e6 is a little bit vulnerable? Or, you know, what do you do here? Well, Aronian played knight d3. Well, the knight looks good. It's starting to move into white's territory around his king, and not bad. But rook c8 check. Strong move. And queen a4 from Carlson. Excellent move. That queen starts to look in lots of different directions. And it's all focusing on black's king. Suddenly you can see that without that pawn on f7, black's king looks vulnerable. Aronian took on b2. Check from the queen. Now, if g6, you can see that fatally exposes the 7th rank. Rook c7 check. That's dreadful. If rook d7, queen takes d5, and the rooks get through to the king. You see, you need that pawn on f7. So Aronian played the best move, rook f5. And now Carlson's next move I really like. We've seen this move on several occasions in the PowerPlay series and the PowerPlay videos. I featured some games by Kasparov where he used this attacking move. King h2. Beautiful move. Just getting the king absolutely safe, ruling out any checks on the back rank before going forward with the attack. I mean, tactically, of course, it's very important. We'd love to exploit this pin with, for example, knight h4, but then check and queen f4 and trades queens, no problem. Or if g4, again, completely impossible because of queen f2 check. So king h2, just getting the king out of the way. And if queen f2 now, then you can just take the knight. White's piece up. Or if knight takes f2, queen a8. Very powerful. This queen, I mean, it's working overtime. You know, these on this diagonal, e4, a8, fantastically powerful. Knight f4 from Aronian. And here, I mean, actually Aronian wasn't short of time. Carlson was actually a little bit short of time. And he missed a good move here. He probably should have played knight h4. So attacking the rook is pinned. And if queen f2, rook g3. Now, it's quite possible that black can defend this position. So white takes an exchange, but of course black does have 2 pawns. But I would say it's a little bit uncomfortable. So knight g6 would prevent a check on h8. Black's queen is very active. The rook does a good job of defending. I mean, probably it should be a draw, but still, you know, black has to be careful here. But that's what Carlson should do. Instead, he played rook c2. Not best, but not easy to appreciate during a game. Aronian now blundered. He should play, well, an extraordinary move actually, queen b8. Now, in a game, incredibly difficult to spot, but Aronian did have time. And the point is this: white must try and exploit this pin. But if he plays g4, there is a miracle defence. You can play knight g6. I mean, this is a real computer defence. It's not easy for a human to see this. However, I would have anticipated if, I mean, Aronian, you know, he's normally he's very good on these kind of slightly strange tactics. So, if pawn takes rook, then black plays pawn takes pawn. Very cool, very cool. And if, for example, queen takes, then rook f6 check. That's the point of putting the queen on b8. Wins. And if after knight g6, say the king moves out of the diagonal, then rook f4. Well, that actually traps white's queen. I mean, it's a fantastic move. Instead, Aronian played queen a1, and after this, he's completely lost. He tried queen f1. But knight e1 defended against the mate, and now there's no defence. Carlson is just a rook up here. and queen f4, queen c4 rather, forces an exchange of queens. So tragedy for Aronian. Afterwards, he said, "I'm devastated. The position I had, I completely spoiled it. I can't find words to describe my feelings. Poor guy. I feel very sorry for Levon. He's really out of form." Well, there was another decisive game. Just very quickly, let me just play through the moves here. Anish Giri played a superb technical game against Veselin Topalov. Rook knight in 3 against rook bishop in 3, and you can see that black's pawns are all split. I'm not going to analyse this, I'll just play through the moves very, very quickly. And Giri's technique was really excellent. He managed to pick off all these pawns and leave himself with 2 connected passed pawns in the middle of the board. And, well, let's just go through to the end very, very quickly. So he forced the bishop away, took this pawn, and here Topalov resigned. It's very easy. Brilliant technique. So that victory of Giri's means that Topalov, well, he's still in the lead, 6 out of 8, but Anand has caught up. He has 5.5. Giri and Nakamura have 5. In the final round, Topalov and Anand play each other, so one of those players will be the winner of the tournament. Watch out for it.